Hey everyone, it's me, Sean Capri. I'm glad you're here because you're listening to the most horse-powerful podcast on the internet. It's the Xbox Drive. I'm on a Skype call with my friend Ryan Turford. He's the man on the moose, and on our journey today, I played the most hardcore game on the planet, so you better find out what it is right here on the Xbox Drive.
Greater than X.
Hello, Sean Capri.
Hello, Ryan Turford. My throat kind of gave me that extra little yeah today. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. You know, I guess it's just one of those, metal days, Sean, where
we're going.
You're just
full metal jacket today.
I mean, now I know where Ellie gets it from, Sean. That's just how
that's for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But she got it nice and early. Like it took me a little while to develop these lungs, these pipes, man. But we're here.
Whereas I would try that, but it's currently 1 degree outside today, and my sinuses are like killing me today, Sean. Because the weather can't decide.
We're in the same boat.
Because it can't decide if it wants to be, minus 20 or plus 10. So it's just all over the place here. But enough about that. Enough about sinuses. Let's, of course, clean the garage a little bit. So folks at home, if you like what we do and you want to support the show, there's a number of awesome ways to do that. Number one, you can rate us on your podcast feed of choice, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. They both offer, rankings. So go and rank us there. Also subscribe to us on all your podcast feeds of choice as well, including Google Play as well. They don't have rankings, but I wanted to throw them in there as well. Also, if you want to see our beautiful faces every single week, head over to YouTube, youtube.com/Yumi Capri. We put up a video version of the show every single Thursday morning, so you can check us out there. Of course, like, subscribe, share, all those things. And then last but not least, of course, if you want early access to this and all of our shows, head over to Patreon, patreon.com/Yumi Capri. Throw a little tip in the old tip jar and out comes content. All right, Sean, let's grab our 8 tracks, pop them in. It is time for the playlist. Talk about all the things we played this week, although I'm looking at the document and neither of us put any games down, so this will be an interesting
I wanted to surprise you.
Oh, geez. What'd you play?
I feel like that is a thing that I want to do from now. I don't know what's better. Sometimes it is good for us to be aware ahead of time, like what we're going to be chatting about, but we got to have at least one element of surprise since I'm sitting in my basement. And the game that I played, the most hardcore game, I've been having a quite hardcore kind of week, Ryan Turford. If you listen to the Nintendo Drive, playing the most gatekeepy kind of games, and by that I'm totally joking. Lego Star Wars. I'm playing Lego Star Wars: The Force Awakens, and this is just kind of where I'm at in my mind space right now, my friend. I want to sit on my old man recliner, have 2 blankets on top of me, maybe listen to a podcast, maybe have something going on the other screen. And I've been scrolling through all my games. You know how I do. And I'm like, I was hovering over Riders Republic. Like it was right there. And I'm like, I'm just not feeling it. And for whatever reason, this is what I want to be doing. And I was pleasantly surprised, man. I don't know. Have you played this game before?
I have not, actually. I've had it pretty much ever since it went on sale about a year after it came out, when it went down to like $8. And then I've never actually installed it or played it. So,
well, kudos to me. I'm patting myself on the back because there's a lot of talk going on the internet these days of me buying a bunch of games and not playing these games. This was one that I picked up on some sort of holiday sale in the last 2 months or so, and I'm after it, man. Like it's a Lego game. It's super cute, and I actually didn't realize that it starts off like the prologue is Return of the Jedi. Actually, you do like the Battle of Endor, and you got Luke, and you got the Emperor, and Darth Vader, all the stuff. And it's just a cutesy Lego game for a Star Wars movie that I happen to like. So how's that for the confrontational, the controversial take? That's my hot take of the day, is that I enjoyed The Force Awakens. So there.
I mean, first of all, how dare you, Sean? How dare you enjoy a movie that the internet liked and then suddenly started disliking?
Right?
I know. I'm not alone in that sentiment. Where even though like I thought the movie was good, it just wasn't amazing. But at the same time, like, yeah, I remember when we first came out of theaters and people were like, "Oh my God, this movie was amazing!"
Like, thank God.
And then the revisionist history of people remembering it falsely, kind of like Phantom Menace, because Phantom Menace was the same way. Where I remember coming out of a theater with lots of people being very excited about that movie.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't have that experience with Phantom Menace at all. I walked out of them like, I think that was bad. Like, was that bad? I think that was.
Yeah. Whereas, 15-year-old Ryan was just so excited that Star Wars was back that when I actually went to go see it in theaters 6 times.
Wow.
And, every single time.
That was Armageddon for me.
Yeah. But every time I went to go see it, you know, there was like cheering and stuff like that when the movie ended and like really positive vibes.
Come on.
Which is like obviously the opposite of how we look at that movie now, which is just funny to look at. But
interesting. Well, in any case, the game is super fun, and I'm just like, I'm approaching it all wrong though. I'll tell you that, because we've got other games coming out very, very soon. I might be tackling this God of War game on PC. So it's kind of like bridges the gap here between Xbox land and PlayStation. Because of course Xbox equals PC, but now also PlayStation equals PC. But I'm like, I want to complete this game. Like this has that nice appeal that like you can go collect everything. You can replay that afterwards. Replay value is great. You get all the other characters. Like it's scratching that itch for me in the biggest way possible. The levels end and all the things that it shoves at you. Like, you know how Lego games end. Yeah. It's like, you got 100% and you got this character and you unlock these red blocks and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, give it to me, game. Like, just give me all of that. So I feel like I've made the right choice because I'm being very satisfied by this right now, Ryan.
Well, especially if you want like a really like easygoing game that you can just throw on and even like listen to podcasts or, you know, just relax to. Like, honestly, the Lego games are great for that. So, yeah, I
haven't been feeling well for the last couple of weeks, honestly. So I think that has a little bit to do with it. Like, and I haven't really been sure what to start. So I'm excited that I found a game that I'm really enjoying and I've started it. I'm like, I feel like I want to continue on instead of just like skipping off of it. Mm-hmm. Quick update on Fury, by the way. Fury is still happening, that boss rush game by the game bakers. I really like it. And I just practice it, you know, maybe I'm at the point where I'm actually practicing bosses. And I'll spend an hour, maybe an hour and a half here or there trying to do the best that I can. And then I get back to Lego. So that's the extreme. That actually is one of the more hardcore games, honestly. So there you go. I actually wasn't joking completely.
You had the mix of the hardcore game and the easy game. So there you go.
That's right. That's right. How about you, man? That's it for me. That's all I've been playing.
Well, the thing is, Sean, I actually left mine empty because honestly, I didn't play anything on Xbox this week. I played a lot of PlayStation 2 and 3DS this week. Because
that's awesome.
Because I'm playing the Valkyrie Profile series from Square Enix, which is kind of like this older RPG series, because we're doing like an episode on that on the RPG Cave in a few weeks. So I want to refresh myself with a lot of those, combined with the fact that I just picked up pretty recently an Analog Mega SG, which is essentially like a newer clone console of the Sega Genesis, and I've been playing a lot of Sega CD games pretty recently, including last night when you talked about playing Wheel of Fortune on the Nintendo Drive, Sean. I booted up Wheel of Fortune on the Sega CD, with like FMV version of Vanilla White, going out there and introducing the puzzles and stuff, and man, it was a good time. So, yeah,
there was a weird puzzle, by the way, on Wheel of Fortune. It was like before and after, and it was the actual answer was Emma Stone flowers. Like, what even is it? Like, maybe I just don't understand the before and after category.
I mean, does Emma Stone become stone flowers? Is that how that works?
I don't really get it. I don't know.
Like,
I
Emma Stone's the before, and then Stone Flowers is the after. Like, how does that work?
Shout out to Wheel of Fortune, though, Ryan. America's game. Something.
It is America's game. Well, let's slam the brakes on this conversation. It is time for some breaking news. And to be honest, there's not a ton of news this week, but there is one really important topic that I want to talk about. And this came from an interview with the New York Times with Phil Spencer. So Phil Spencer actually confirmed in this interview that at this point in the console generation, Xbox Series consoles are the fastest selling generation of Xbox platforms across all Xbox generations. That includes Xbox One, which was the original leader, the current leader so far. Spencer didn't give specific numbers, as Xbox is want to do at this point. But the number estimated by analysts is over 12 million units, because the Xbox One, they had announced around this time in the life cycle that that's how many units they had sold. And Phil Spencer says they've sold more than that. So it has to be over 12 million. Not only that, but the last time we got numbers from Sony, which was about 3 months ago, the PlayStation 5 had hit 13 million units sold. So we're probably due for some numbers on the PlayStation 5, because Sony usually likes to put them out every quarter. So I would imagine we get those numbers in the next kind of couple weeks, and then we can kind of compare and contrast them a little bit. But what do you think about this news, John? Because I think it's like super interesting that it's sold like this well.
I love it. And I love that like we now have enough data that like even though they're being pretty cagey about the numbers, you know, it doesn't take the most advanced algebra and calculus to start to figure out like give or take where they lie. And I think the takeaway here that really surprised me, Ryan, was that like they're kind of within striking distance. They're kind of like there with PlayStation. This notion that I think like maybe VG charts, which can we just say VG charts unreliable, like not real numbers is what I'll say about VG charts.
It's something.
It's definitely something, but this does give us a little bit of sense of maybe this Series S strategy has worked out really well. And you and I have chatted about this even when I think people were trying to marginalize how well Xbox was selling or even that Series S's were available. And it's like as a detractor to Xbox's appeal or whatever they were trying to do. And it's like, that was the strategy. I feel like that is so smart for them to address the fact that they need to win people back, perhaps back from PlayStation or have a product for new gamers in general. So the Series S is kind of achieving its goal, like just on its own. Mm-hmm. And then of course you got the Series X for many of us. And then in some cases you've got both people like us buying both of them.
Yeah.
And so the net of this story, I think, is just like PlayStation, I think, needs to have a big year. And it'll be interesting to hear if you guys chat about this on the flip side on the PlayStation Drive at all. Mm-hmm. But it's great to have Xbox and PlayStation. Of course, Nintendo is crushing it as well. Like they're all doing so good. And I don't know, it excites me as obviously we create content around this stuff. And I want there to be lots of consoles out there so that new developers or returning developers come back and make new and exciting games for us. That's where it comes down to. It has nothing to do with like, I have no stock in Microsoft. I have no personal attachment. It's just, I have the console. So I hope that lots of copies get sold, lots of consoles get sold, so more games come out for us.
So one interesting wrinkle, because I'm glad that you actually brought up PlayStation in this conversation, because one interesting wrinkle that came from this around the same time was that Sony had announced that they're going to be ramping up production on PlayStation 4s because they can't make enough PlayStation 5s, but they want people to play the games that are coming out this year, like Horizon next month. So it's really interesting. It's almost like they're going back to the PlayStation 4 because that's kind of like their version of the strategy that Microsoft's employing with the Series S, where the Series S doesn't require as many parts as the Series X, so they're able to put it out. Whereas if Microsoft was only making Series X's, Phil mentioned in the interview that they wouldn't be able to make nearly as many consoles as they were able to make with Series S's and Series X's stock. Not only that, but like the Series X, like as soon as they go on sale, like even here in Canada, like they're gone. Like they're gone within like 2 minutes, essentially, at this point. So they're selling every one of those that they are actually able to physically produce. So even if their number is even lower than Sony's, it's just one of those things where it's like, well, they can only manufacture so many of them, right? So
and they've had a year now. The consoles have been out for a little over a year, which is mind-boggling. Like even as I say that, I'm like, I'm waiting for somebody to correct me as if like they just came out in November. But the thing is, like, I don't know that there's really been a case or an example where a game came out and played so poorly on the Series S that it ruined the appeal to it. I feel like a year in, it's as good a case as any to go like, maybe you really have to think twice about, do you need to spend the extra hundreds of dollars to bump up to the Series X? Because the S is it's a compelling case, man. Like I think a lot of people, I would recommend it to a lot of people for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely true to what their vision was when they first announced the Series S, which is that if you only have a 1080p TV, or if you're mostly playing in 1080p or 1440p, then you don't need a Series X. Like it's good enough on its own. The only downside to the Series S, well, there's two. The storage size, obviously.
Yeah,
you need to look at kind of expanding that. But then number two is just backwards compatibility isn't as good with a lot of titles. Like Outer Worlds, for example, was the one that we talked about on the show.
Oh, that's what you mean. Yeah, that's true. And it's not as, it's not so bad that it, like I said, it doesn't ruin it, doesn't soil or sully the case for it. I thought you were going to go for backwards compatibility and that you can't use discs. Of course, like there's no
there's that. But I mean, I think that's becoming less and less of an issue, especially with the Xbox, way that Xbox pushes things, for example.
Right.
So.
You got Game Pass. Those so many games that people have and that they would be putting the disc in, they just have they have it on Game Pass now.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the only scenario where you can't really play it is if something like Otogi 2, which just recently became backwards compatible, but for some reason
exactly.
You can't buy that on the store, but it's like a $200 disc if you want to buy it. So like I have that game, but I'm like, do I even want to put it in my Xbox for fear of it? You know,
I think you should sell it, man.
Stuff like that.
You're just sitting on a $200 game there.
The price keeps going up, Sean.
Oh, I like it.
As every month has gone by since it's become backwards compatible, it's become higher and higher.
Retirement plan. Nice.
It might just be worth waiting at this point. It's actually somehow become like the most expensive original Xbox game now, which is crazy to me because I never thought that would ever happen. I remember buying that game off Amazon brand new for $20 like 3 years ago. So
what an investment.
I know. But yeah, so going back to your point before about neither of us really having stock in Microsoft, I'm with you 100% on your point where I really hope that this shows developers that, hey, it's okay to bring your games to Xbox that if you're not bringing them already, especially Japanese developers. Because I think that like Japanese developers that want to have their games break out in the West, like they should be targeting Xbox and PlayStation and even Switch too, because I think obviously the Switch audience is so big that they can't ignore it. But I think they should be targeting all three platforms rather than we see a lot of these releases that are just PlayStation and Switch, but not Xbox from Japanese developers like Persona 5 Arena Ultimax or the remake that's coming out in March of the fighting game. It's only coming to PlayStation 4 and Switch, even though that game was on 360. So it's just weird to me that it's not coming to Xbox, but stuff like that. Like I hope that this shows developers, hey, you can put your games on Xbox. People will play it. So
I just think the narrative matters, like on a number of fronts, and even just like when people react or respond to games. I think when Xbox is cool and a lot of people are playing it, there's a level of forgiveness and benefit of the doubt that happens. And we see that with Nintendo. We see it with PlayStation, where there's just a bunch of people playing these things. And if a game doesn't like totally hit, then it's not the end of the world. It's not like, oh, well, it was dead anyways. Like I don't know, like there's so many components to what goes into an overall narrative of how consoles are doing. And I think it's important that something is seen as sustainable, as popular, as all these things as a thing, so that we can just like, now we don't have to talk about that anymore. And Xbox has really done a good job of like dispelling a lot of these myths about it, that there's no games, that nobody's playing it, it's underpowered, it's overpriced, like all the stuff from Xbox One. If they can solve the nobody cares about Xbox, like then that's great. And that gets them back into 360 days, which was awesome, man. I spent, shout out to Bronson Fiore and everybody over at GameCraft. I spent the weekend or a lot of Sunday actually discussing the 20 years of Xbox. And it's like, oh, remember those 360 days? They were a big deal and they were great for gamers. So I feel like we're, actually I was going to say slowly but surely, but very quickly returning back to those days, it feels like.
Yeah, and not only that, but we keep seeing, because I've also been following kind of the Famitsu sales charts in Japan as well. And at this point, the Xbox is actually outselling the PlayStation 4 in Japan and is becoming more and more popular there.
That's interesting.
Like the units are like not in the tens to hundreds that they used to be right. The Xbox One generation. Like they're in the thousands, coming closer to the tens of thousands in Japan. So the systems are also selling better, like even in markets like Japan that ignored Xbox before. So I think that's going to just help grow the audience and help attract more games to the platform as well. So yeah, and it kind of helped the narrative as well. So, and the
Xbox Drive, just so everybody knows, we started the Xbox Drive in the doldrums of the Xbox Panther, like probably in the worst case scenario. So, we've been around the mill. It's not like everybody else like, oh, Xbox is cool, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm just kidding. I'm glad there's a lot of new podcasts around it, but just saying, we're here first.
I mean, I joined the podcast, Sean, right around when the turning point started to happen. That's right. So for me, I was never really on an Xbox podcast before that.
I actually think it's like kudos to you. I think you did it. Ryan joins an Xbox podcast, things start to turn around. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah, I just turned it around. They're like, it just needed that extra little push, Sean.
Cause and effect, man. It's science.
And me calling for Otogi 2 to come to Xbox.
Exactly. He brought balance to the Xbox Force.
For sure. All right, next up, this news actually came pretty much right after we stopped recording last week, so I wanted to include it here because I'm actually pretty excited about this game. Nobody Saves the World, of course, from Drinkbox Studios, which is a Xbox exclusive title, or at least timed exclusive for now, is coming to Xbox and Game Pass on January 18th, so that's next week. From the time you're listening to this, I am very excited about this game. Of course, this is Drinkbox doing a top-down RPG, which gets me excited because they've only really done like Metroidvanias before or like first person dungeon crawling games like Severed. But they've never really made like a traditional action RPG like this one before. So I'm really excited to see how this one turns out. I know kind of reviewers are playing this one right now, and I'm really interested to see
I'm jealous.
what reviews are like. Plus, got to give a shout out to them too, because they're right down the road in Toronto. So
nice.
Canadian studio as well. And they've always
the
been
one
super
road
talented.
in Canada is what you mean.
Exactly. So
yeah,
Sean,
we have one road.
Where's your excitement level for this one?
I mean, I don't actually know a whole lot about the game itself, but the studio, you're right. And I'm so glad you brought up Severed. It's one of my favorite games of all time, actually. Very, very memorable. And I actually played that on the Vita. So shout out to the freaking Vita on that one. And then did it come to the Wii U? Actually, I think it came there as well.
It came to Wii U and Switch, but the Switch version, you have to play it in touchscreen only. You can't actually use any of the face buttons.
One of the best touchscreen games of all time. But yeah, no, this is a great get for Game Pass. I think it's just the start, honestly. We also talked, I think, last week about Rainbow Six Extraction coming to Game Pass day and date. So I'm really curious to see like what 2022 has in store for us, in addition to the first party stuff that we know kind of comes anyways. That is sad that that's almost become uninteresting. It's like, okay, well, yeah, sure. Halo comes to Game Pass. Like, I'm sorry. Halo's a gigantic game and Forza was a gigantic game. Those are huge gets for Game Pass. But seemingly, I would say where the excitement kind of comes from is these third party deals of that game's coming to Game Pass. And this one is too.
Yeah, even though it's a smaller game, it's a game that I know a lot of people who follow indie games. Like, this is one of their most anticipated indie games of the year.
Yeah, so a lot of people are excited about it for sure. Yeah. The Gunk I've got downloaded as well. I don't know why those two sort of like seem to occupy the same space for me for whatever reason, but I want to get to that one as well.
I mean, it's Image and Form, Sean. We love those guys too. So
they're not even North American though, so I'm not sure exactly why. It's similar in my brain.
It's all pipes, but it's gonna be a good week because we got Rainbow Six Extraction and Nobody Saves the World next week for Game Pass. So I think that's gonna be a good week.
So I better hurry up on this Lego game, is what you're saying.
Exactly, but you don't need to hurry up for Stalker 2. Heart of Chernobyl.
Oh, good one. Nice.
They announced this morning that that game has been delayed until December 8th. This was originally supposed to come out in April, and it is an Xbox timed exclusive as well. So, and going to be day and date with Game Pass, which is pretty awesome. The trailers that they've been showing for it have been pretty cool, but they basically said due to, everything that's happening in the world right now, they had to delay it. But December 8th, I think, is probably a good time for this game too, because I don't know how many other things are really going to be launching around it, and it's going to be a Game Pass day one game anyway. So we saw that, strategy work with Halo, and I think it's probably a good strategy for this one as well. I'm excited to see more from this game. What do you think about this news, John?
It's a complicated game, I think, isn't it, Ryan? Like, it seems like there's a lot going on with this thing. Are they doing NFTs? Are they not doing NFTs? I'm not really sure. That's got to be a consideration in this. Like, if they're making a change that is essential to that, then I'm very curious to know if they even stick the December landing. So ultimately, with every delay, we hope that, that it turns out for the best. But it's still COVID times. As much as we don't want to think about this, it's still where we're at, and who knows? But I don't know. I don't have a huge attachment to this game. I'm not going to lie. I'm curious to see how it turns out. I think it has shown very well. I'm actually surprised at the hype that seems to be surrounding this game. And that's all. I'm never going to try to detract from that, but I can't pretend like I've been like waiting on bated breath for this game, because I haven't. So we'll see. But I think the most critical part about it is that NFT component. We'll see what happens as we're in a bit of a time with games. What's happening with these non-fungible token things, right?
Yeah, we got the Castlevania NFT announcement this week, which was something. So I think they actually said on Twitter, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, YouTube, that I'm pretty sure they announced already that they're removing the NFTs because people were complaining about them, which again might tie into the delay. But I would imagine when this game comes out, there aren't any NFTs in the game proper, hopefully.
Right.
I guess we'll find out, in December. But this one's like a cult classic on PC. Like, a lot of people are really into this game on PC, which is why I think like that's why there's so much excitement for this one beyond kind of some of the trailers that we saw for it, which I think it's also shown really well to your point as well. So yeah, I'm excited to try it out when it comes out. I mean, I probably wouldn't have tried it out if it wasn't on Game Pass, but because it's going to be on Game Pass, you better believe I'll be downloading it on December 8th and trying it out as well. Well, let's let some of our friends into the car with us, Sean. It is time for the carpool. Yes, we're out of news this week. Folks at home, if you want to let us know what's going on, what you want us to talk about, you can follow us on Twitter at Yumi Capri's. We put up a question post every single Tuesday. Sometimes a video from Sean. Otherwise, it's an anime gift from Ryan, where you kind of leave your questions there and we answer them. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, You can leave a question in the YouTube comments and we'll answer it on the show. Or you can join the Yumi and Capri Discord. It's free to join. Links in the show notes. And you can leave your question there as well. Just make sure to tell us it's a question for the show if it's not part of the question posts. Just like Banger Bros for Life at Awesome Dave.
Come on.
1337 did on Twitter. Awesome Dave. I'm actually kind of surprised that's his name. Even though we know Awesome Dave, he's a awesome patron as well.
We just said that on the show. Holy cow.
Hey, I'm just reading it how he has his name on Twitter. Okay, Sean?
I guess so. I guess that's what we do. It was on the teleprompter, right?
Exactly. Well, you'll understand more when I actually read his question here as to why I included that as well. With both Forza and Halo coming out last year and both being bangers, do you think Xbox will be able to keep up this momentum going? Sony has a pretty stacked first quarter with Horizon and Sifu. Also Gran Turismo, he didn't note that, but I wanted to inject in there. Will Microsoft lay low and wait to drop more bangers in Q3/Q4 of this year? So you said banger twice in there. Combined with
starting to understand why I'm the name. I'm starting to understand why Bad Bid actually has banned this word on his show. But nonetheless, I think Awesome Dave brings up a really good point, Ryan. And I don't know if I really have a solid answer into this, which might be a little like, what's going on with Xbox? I don't want to use the word worried. I don't like to fearmonger or anything. But as of right now, if we look at like the games that we're looking at that are coming out in 2022 as exclusive to Xbox or something that we really care about on Xbox, like I don't think that there's really a whole heck of a lot. And you and I did a Patreon exclusive episode of the Console War Room, the Xbox Drive versus the Trophy Room. We did a fantasy critic draft and we picked games that we thought were going to review quite well. And to be honest, like our lineup didn't really include maybe one Xbox exclusive. We went with games like Gran Turismo and Kirby's The Forgotten Land, like Nintendo games. So yeah, like when we were looking at the whole year just recently in detail through the lens of a fantasy draft, not a whole lot there. So I'm kind of hoping for some sort of whatever they're calling Nintendo Directs in Xbox land these days. I kind of hope for something like that well before E3. And then of course for them to have a banger E3.
Of course. I'm glad you snuck that in there. So I actually wanted to put this question actually pretty close to our Stalker story as well, because Stalker was going to kind of be one of the bigger first party exclusives for the year. And it actually just ended up getting delayed to the second half of the year. And I think the farthest game that we know of from Xbox that's along anyways is probably something like Redfall, which they announced was coming out this summer as opposed to, at the end of the year. And I would imagine we probably get like a June or July release date for it unless it gets delayed.
We'll see.
I mean, it's Arcane, so they have a tendency of delaying their games as well. So who knows? So yeah, I'm in agreement with Awesome Dave here. Where honestly, I think that you're probably looking for it's looking probably like another year like last year where you have smaller stuff like Nobody Saves the World, which is an exclusive coming out next week. But beyond that, we don't like have a lot of bigger exclusive stuff. It's
updates to Halo, maybe DLC for Forza. Like this is where the narrative kind of comes back. Like it's just Forza, Gears, and Halo kind of thing over again. But this is also where Game Pass gets are really, really important. But I also don't imagine that they will have a quiet year. I really don't think they will. We just don't know what it is right now. And it is interesting to note that, how well Xbox is selling. And it's like, I mean, I guess they did have a really good holiday lineup with Forza and Halo. Like they kind of gave it a year into the thing. That was actually well timed, I would say. So yeah, I think like for me, and I see all these 2022 dates, and in some cases we have a season attached to it. In some cases we don't. We just have the year. I'm just doubtful. So I just have a lot of, I'm not hanging on any of these dates at all. I think I just basically look at anything that has a date that says 2022. I'm like, that'll get delayed. It's not happening this year. I have complete and utter doubt. So I will be pleasantly surprised when they start saying, no, this game's coming out this time. This game's coming out this time. But at this moment, we don't really have it.
Yeah. And I mean, you have to also remember at this point last year, we didn't even know Forza was coming last year.
That's right.
As an example. Yeah. So, I mean, there's going to be an announcement of games where they announce them this year and they're up this year. So,
McDonald's makes a return on the show. Thank you so much, Chelsea. It brings me coffee and a Diet Coke, Ryan. What do you think about that?
That's too much caffeine right there, Sean. It's a lot of caffeine.
It's a medium. It's actually just a medium coffee.
Yeah,
but a large Diet Coke.
I was going to say that's a lot of caffeine right there. But yeah, so I imagine that we're going to, especially too from Bethesda, because like we don't know what they're doing this year besides Starfield.
What are they doing?
Like we know Ghostwire Tokyo is coming to PlayStation, but that's it. Like we don't know anything else they're doing. So
we'll get Deadloop day one on Game Pass.
Yeah, I mean, Deathloop will be coming to Xbox probably this year.
Yeah, thank you.
So there's that. And I mean, I'm sure they have something else coming this year that we don't know about either. So yeah, I think there's a number of
Microsoft Flight Simulator, Top Gun Maverick, Ryan. We're going to get some sweet Tom Cruise in our flight simulator.
That's contingent on whether or not, the movie Top Gun Maverick even comes out this year.
It's coming out, man. Believe in Tom Cruise. Believe in Tom Cruise. Save me, Jesus. Save me, Tom Cruise.
I'm just shaking my head at you. All right. Next question comes to us from Court Lalonde at Court Lalonde. I don't want us to get a copyright strike on that, Sean.
That was pretty good, right?
What will the future hold for Xbox Series S? So pretty open-ended question on this one. Honestly, I think that it might just end up being like the best selling of the two consoles by the time this is all said and done. One, because people can actually find them, and two, because to Sean's point, I think it's actually a pretty good buy, or it's a good second system for a lot of people. Like if someone's a Nintendo Switch owner, for example, this is like a huge upgrade for them, and for about the prices of a Nintendo Switch. So I do think that that's kind of the future for it. And who knows what happens with console revisions, because I'm sure Microsoft's got another console revision down the road at some point, whether it's the Xbox Series E or something like that, like the Series SS. Yeah. Like something like that's going to be coming.
Hopefully they don't have an SS. That's kind of German.
Yeah. But I would imagine it's going to be like one of the pillar consoles for at least 3 years. And then from there, when they introduce another model, that's kind of when they maybe push it to the side at least a little bit. Kind of like the Xbox One VCR.
You just said 3 years, and I think that raises maybe the point that Court is maybe getting to here, which is like, what is an appropriate lifespan for the Xbox Series S? Everybody understands that it's sort of the lesser of the two. Do you expect it to have the same life cycle as a full console? I think the answer is no, but then like, where is that line? What is that number?
Well, I would imagine that even if it doesn't get the full life cycle, it will only be a couple of years behind the full life cycle, because I mean, it just depends, though, what the full life cycle is going to happen for this generation.
What does that mean?
Because of, obviously, the supply issues. Like, is that going to extend this console generation farther into the future than they originally planned? Because if so, obviously, that stretches the 3 years that I quoted there. The 3 years I quoted is if this console generation is going to last 5 years, let's say.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So you think like 60% of a life cycle. So I don't know if you can extrapolate from there.
Right. So So I would do the conversion. So let's say it's going to last 10 years. I think that the Series S will last 6 years, probably.
Well, and the other thing too is Xbox hasn't really demonstrated any precedent that they just abandon a console. Like, so when I say the life cycle of this thing, what I really mean to say is like when people are paying attention to it, because you can still play Halo Infinite on the VCR Xbox One with the Kinect attached to it. Like that support is still there, but nobody cares about it. Nobody and I'm speaking in extremes here, but most people have moved on. So when I think about like, are they going to have another console or something else to draw your attention to? Yeah, I think actually 3 years makes a lot of sense for them to have some sort of revision, maybe a bigger hard drive, maybe I don't know what they can do. They have to be careful now though. Like they now have two different configurations. And so if they have a mid-cycle revision like they did before, do they times that by 2? Do they have an Xbox S version 2 and an Xbox Series X version 2? Now you've got 4 to support. And I don't know. That sounds very complicated to me.
Yeah, that's why like I imagine if they're going to do a revision, it'll be like one revision at a time that kind of like maybe mixes the two together. Like maybe it's an all digital console that has like maybe even like slightly improved specs on the Series X or something like that. But who knows?
I think hard drive is probably the biggest thing, honestly, with that one. I think they can have the version 2 could be same price, bigger hard drive, very similar to what they did with the One S, I think. But this is Future Phil's problem. This is him. He'll quit Team Xbox and he'll just be like, you guys figure it out. Like, what are we supposed to do with this? You made two SKUs, man. What are we supposed to do?
Although and I'm going to say this now, I would be very surprised if we don't get to a point in 3 years or less that we don't have a all digital only Series X for a
I agree.
price.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like kind of like what they did with the SAD edition, or even what PlayStation does with the PlayStation 5 digital version. Like I think that's kind of a market they could corner at some point as well. Maybe cut down on costs because they don't have to put like a CD drive in it and stuff like that. So
imagine a CD drive. Imagine a $399 Series X, American dollars, of course.
Well, I'm allowed to call it a CD drive, Sean, because you can technically play CDs on your CD-ROM. Series X. You can,
yeah, man.
I mean, because it has the audio CD app on it, Sean. You just put your Persona 4 soundtrack in there and it'll work. So
well, give us a CD dash R or RW on there too. Let's write some.
Only
let's
if we can get an
master tracks on there.
HD DVD.
That'd be my
attachment.
dream. That's
Yeah.
my dream. That's my dream.
All right. Next up, Dano at Dano12 says,
What's up, Dano?
a bit gaming after dark, but what gaming related PJs do you all have and how many? Do you remember the movie Gamer? Which character from a game of your choice would you selfishly risk their life in their world or ours? I don't know what he means by that, but let's tackle the first question, Sean. Gaming PJs. Do you own gaming PJs at all?
Can I be honest with you? Almost all of my PJs are gaming related.
Of course.
A lot of Mario, actually. Like Nintendo does swag and I don't know what merch just so good. You find it everywhere and all over the place. Those are my primaries. But also I have an Xbox onesie. I don't know if that counts as PJs, but very like it's comfy wear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that for sure.
But
lots.
I haven't actually owned PJs since I was 10. So 1993. So
10.
There you go. That's the answer to that
11-year-old
question.
Ryan just writes it off, just burns it all. Like,
I'm not going to get into what I sleep in, but that's definitely not PJs. That's for sure. Yeah. Sterling Silver at Sterling Silver with a 3 instead of an E asks, do you think the Fable franchise holds as much weight as it used to since it's been gone for such a long time? What changes or improvements do you want to see with the new title developed by Playground Games? So first of all, Sean, it's been a long time since Fable 3 or Fable the Journey, I think was the last Fable game, which was the Connect Fable game. Do you think it's been too long for Fable? What do you think?
There is a fine line, isn't there, Ryan, for a game or a franchise to go away for just long enough where you want it back. Like you're just clamoring for this thing to come back. And then there is the case where like, I think Perfect Dark could be an example of this too. Like, has that one been too long? The same question could be asked of that one. In the case of, do people still care about it? Are the people who cared about it the last time it was popular, are they still around? Are they still gaming? Does it matter? For Fable, I think it is in that sweet spot. And I think it's very similar to what like God of War maybe experienced when it was returned back in 2018. And I think it's got a great developer behind it in a way that it will just really bring it up to speed in terms of a lot of what we see in Western RPGs now is kind of what I'm expecting. But I also don't have a huge amount of time with the Fable series, to be honest with you. But from just do people care about it? Has it been too long? I think the answer is no. And I think we're seeing that when people are excited about the lineup that Xbox has, Fable continues to be brought up and they just want to see it done right. And I wonder if having it done by Playground actually gives it a little extra credence in a weird way, rather than having Lionhead, if they just continued on. Because remember, they were doing Legends, and people were not happy about it. They were not looking forward to that game. So yeah, I think everything happens for a reason. I think Fable is being received in the way that it is because of all the things that have happened, even though it includes the closure of a very storied and very well-regarded developer like Lionhead.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm with you. I don't think it's been too long for Fable. Like, I think people like seem very excited for that game. Like every time Microsoft announced, new news, I always see people kind of tweeting at Microsoft or commenting saying, hey, where's Fable? When can we learn more about this game? Even though I think that that's like a 2024 game at this point. So I think that people are really excited for this game and I hope they do it right. And I mean, Playground has shown that they're a top tier developer and I have every faith that they're going to nail it with this one and do the things that you talked about where they're going to maybe modernize it a little more than maybe, Pierre and Molyneux Studio wasn't able to really do. So
yeah, and those games were popular in the 360 days. Like games were just different. They really were. You play old games all the time. And I think people would be very surprised to like go back to some of these and go, I don't know, it's a combination of quality of life and just level design and how you're guided through and all the things, the variety of side quests and how they interact with your main quest, like and your main story. All those things have changed and been iterated like week to week, month to month, let alone going back 2 generations worth of games. This game being brought to Series X consoles means more than just power. It's just the way that the game is developed and designed. Yeah. And Playground has done a great job with a racing game. Like they make you want to stay in an open world and you're just in a car. Like that's like the ultimate limitation. And they've had to figure out a way to keep people engaged in that. So I have no doubt that once you get out of the car and you get to journey in the way that you would with a game like Fable, that we're going to be in that world for a long, long time.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Next up, Todd Oxtra at Toxtra asks, Do we get a new Xbox Elite 3 controller with immersion inputs like the DualSense? So I think this goes back to something we talked about last week, Sean, where I think that the DualSense kind of immersion stuff is going to be worked into kind of the baseline controller and not just be an Elite thing.
That's my prediction.
Especially like for developers to want to take advantage of it, they have to have it on more than just the Elite controller for that to work, for that to happen. I mean, again, the reason why they do it on PlayStation is because the developers know that everyone has access to that. So I do think we'll see an Elite 3 controllers. But if it has that, it'll be timed with like a revision of the main controller to have that.
Agreed.
As well.
I think it'll be adaptable. I think it actually allows you to like take it one step further where maybe that you can turn it up or down, or I don't know exactly what you might want to do with this, but maybe that's the version where you can really tweak the experience is on the Elite controller. Those are things that we have already in terms of adjusting the triggers and adjusting the thumbsticks. You can even swap them out. You can do a lot of fine tuning on that. So I could see them leaving that being exclusive to the Elite, just having that as a better experience. Like how much do you want, and really fine tuning it in that way.
For sure. And the last question comes to us from Matt Midwood at Assemble Show.
Ooh,
he asks, what, quote, big moves should Xbox do in 2022? Last year had lots of bangers. What's next?
Good God.
Acquisitions, partnerships. What do we think about this one? So yeah, I think that they'll probably do more acquisitions this year if there's a studio that makes sense for them. But I think that Microsoft has done kind of just buying studios for the sake of buying studios. I think they're going, and I don't think it was ever really that way. So that's not really to put them down. So I think if there's a studio that makes sense and the price makes sense, they'll definitely acquire them. But otherwise, I don't really know if they really make any big moves beyond games and just getting hardware out the door. But what do you think about this question, Sean?
It has to be tied to something big. And maybe this is just something we explore for a minute or two on this. And that, like, when I think about how PlayStation really succeeded, of course, everybody thinks about it was more powerful, it cost less, you could share games, all these different things. But some things that maybe go overlooked because that conversation is really complex is the partnerships that Sony made, in addition to how they partnered with indies in the early days. But they're like, Call of Duty is the new home. The new home of Call of Duty is now on PlayStation. At the time when that was announced, I think people were like, "Who cares about Call of Duty?" That turned out to be a gigantic deal. Bungie and Destiny, of course, knew and also almost seemed like a backstab to Microsoft. Like, Bungie is now home on PlayStation. The guys who made Halo, they're over here on PlayStation. That was a big deal. Batman games, Star Wars games, those were gigantic. I think those four, right off the top of my head, were really, really important third-party partnerships that they did. And I don't see Xbox really doing anything like this. And anytime that they have partnered, at least within the last generation, it's kind of backfired a little bit. Like Cyberpunk kind of comes to mind. Yep. And there are examples kind of throughout that just don't seem to land in the same way. So PlayStation has Marvel with Wolverine and Spider-Man and everything. I would love to see a little bit more partnership with Xbox and DC and these Gotham Knights games and the Suicide Squad games, which I think would be really interesting. And I also look back to the playbook back in the 360 days. Where is this System Shock game that might be coming back? What's Ken Levine doing? What's his next game going to be? How do we get those third-party exclusives that are even new? Because God knows we can't do third-party exclusives like we used to do them. You can't do a Rise of the Tomb Raider anymore. You have to find a diamond in the rough somewhere, like BioShock and Mass Effect before those came out. I think that they need to do something like that. And I just don't know exactly what that is, but that's kind of the strategy that I've got in my mind for it.
Yeah. And beyond that, like, I would also say kind of big Game Pass acquisitions might be the
right, and that's kind of what I mean. Yeah, totally.
Exactly. So even if they don't have the marketing, thing for it, if they have the game day one on Game Pass and kind of shout the bucks for that, I think that's more in the direction I expect them going. Not necessarily getting like the Call of Duty DLC, for example, coming first to Xbox. I think the direction they maybe go in is like having the game, like, one of the big games this fall, like maybe Call of Duty, for example, as an example, comes out on Game Pass day and date, for example. Obviously, I know
we thought Battlefield would have. You would have thought that something like that might have, and maybe Cyberpunk does have its redemption story this year. And one thing I want to ask you about, because I didn't even say it because it's just so like, I think it's a given that when I talk about partnerships, it means Game Pass. Do you think that Xbox has sort of like limited itself in that it has to be Game Pass? Because you had a game like Scarlet Nexus, which did have the marketing rights, and everybody was confused. They're like, oh, it's the Xbox is promoting this thing and it's not coming to Game Pass. So maybe that hurt its sales. Like, I think it's an interesting position for Xbox right now.
Well, especially like the sales for that game in particular, where it was like 14% of people who bought that game bought it on Xbox and the rest bought it on PlayStation. Wow. So it's like, yeah, it's just, I think people just, when people see the marketing for Xbox, I think you're right about that. They expect it to be on Game Pass. Like anything that Microsoft, kind of markets, their expectations there, where if it's not their day one, it will be down the road at some point.
Yeah. So and I think that has more to do with just the type of game that it is, being like a JRPG game. People tend to think about that more, or tended maybe in the past on PlayStation. But I do think that there's importance to these marketing deals where sometimes people don't even know that they're coming out for the other console.
Right.
Like they don't say it's exclusive, but like you see the logo at the end and you just think that game is an Xbox game. I think that's important.
Yeah, with the casual audience as well. Yeah. I think that people who are less informed about that, especially with something like Back 4 Blood, even before they announced it was coming to Game Pass.
That's a great example.
Microsoft had that deal for it, and I think a lot of people thought it was only on Xbox. So
yeah, good call.
Anyways, we got to go, Sean. But before we go, Sean, plugs go.
You can find me on Twitter and on Twitch at Sean Capri, Sean like Connor, Capri like the pants. And if you like the show even just a little bit, patreon.com/YumiCapri.
As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You can find us on Twitter at Yumi Capri's, on YouTube at youtube.com/YumiCapri, and on podcast services around the globe. So for Sean Capri, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been episode 222 of the Xbox Drive. It's a palindrome, folks, and we're out. Oh,
that's a genuine reaction from me every time that I seem surprised on the shows, because I don't really pay attention to any of the show notes, like what episode number it is or what news we're gonna contribute towards and talk about, and I'm just gonna be hyped up on all my caffeine and like thankful to my wife for the drinks. Bah! The Xbox Drive is fueled by patrons at patreon.com/YumiCapri, and from the bottom of my heart, I am so grateful to the nearly 70 patrons who support us each and every month. With special thanks to our Capremium producers, Dallas Ford, Lee Navarro, the fearless leader of the Phoenix Overdrive Extra Life team, and Jonathan Brown, the man behind the music on the Xbox Drive and the Nintendo Drive. You can support Jonathan Brown at youtube.com/GamingPurpleMonkey. Our platinum producers, Robbie Bobby Miller and Trucker Sloth, and all of our gold members, Argo, Benji Kong, Brendan Myers, Dallas Robbins, Dano, Emily O'Kelly, Foolish Fuji, Heather Boney, James Johnson, Dr. Doom, Joel Brooks, Jose Jimenez, Mac Time, Marcus O'Neill, Mr. and Mrs. Nasty Boots, RJ Kern, Skinny Matt, and Xavier Reyes. If you'd like to support this show, go to patreon.com/YumiCapri and choose the Patreon tier that works for you.